Hey, my name's Sunny, and this is my cat Boris. Now, while I own a cat and have had no trouble with owning a cat, I was nervous when I first got a cat because I hadn't had a cat before and I wasn't sure exactly what I needed to know. I was always worried that I would watch some videos, read some articles, and get some of the knowledge that I needed, but miss out on some crucial detail that would come back to bite me and the cat in the future. And after doing some research, maybe too much, I found that there's just a bit of knowledge that you need to know to own a cat, not an encyclopedia. And having that knowledge in an easy-to-access place where you have it all laid out in front of you can really help set an owner's mind at ease. So that's what I'm going to attempt today. Now, remember, I am not a vet or an animal care specialist. I'm not an authority on cats, nor an expert. So, keep in mind, take everything I say with a little bit of a grain of salt, and always do your own research. But keep in mind, I have done a lot of research, checked sources, and tried my best to provide you with what I could find to be some of the most accurate information that I could find. So, with that, let's get into this video where I'll try and teach you how to own a cat. So, let's begin at the very, very beginning of the process. Just contemplating getting a cat. There's a reason that cats and dogs are seen as perhaps the quintessential pets in the public's eye. They're great pets. But cats in particular have been subject to a lot of sort of misconceptions and myths throughout history that make it hard for people to consider getting a cat without falling prey to these myths. So let's discuss a few myths and conceptions about cats and see if they really are true. Alright, so myth number 1. Cats are mean. I'm sure you've heard this before somewhere, be it from movies, TV, or just other people. A lot of times cats are portrayed as rude, narcissistic, lazy, aggressive, uncaring, and hostile, especially when compared to the loving man's best friend, the dog. But is it true? Well, generally no, but specifically it depends. Cats aren't machines, they are living things. And while they aren't as smart as us, they do have enough brain power to have their own personalities. While they're not going to be out building computers or rocket ships anytime soon, again, they have their own unique personalities, and so sometimes you will get a cat who is a mean cat, but you can also get a dog who's a mean dog. You can meet people who are mean people. They have personalities just like dogs, us, and many other creatures. So in general, cats aren't mean as a general statement, because there's plenty of nice cats like mine. But there always is the possibility that you could get a cat with a mean personality. But in general, no. It is not true that cats as an animal are always mean, always uncaring. Really, it just depends on the personality. But that's something that has to do with many, many pets, not just cats. So, really, there's various factors that will actually influence how your cat behaves. Improper care, for example, can lead a cat to become more hostile, more irritable, and just generally worse on its behavior. And there's other factors too, such as the cat's breed. Because, it is not an exact indicator, but it is a huge factor. And breed is an extremely important thing to consider before getting a cat that surprisingly many people don't consider, and some people don't even know what breed their cat is. However, even though many people would just pick an option that they like, look through the bunch and find a cute kitty to take home, really, that is not a good strategy, because getting a right breed can be a great and enriching experience for the both of you. But getting the wrong breed can lead to some trouble. For example, say you live in a very, very small space, and you decide to get a cat, and you pick one out, and it's a Maine Coon. Now, a Maine Coon is the biggest domestic cat species, getting around a meter long from tip to tail, so that can be really hard in a very, very small space. However, get a Russian Blue like mine, or an American Shorthair, or something like that, and they can live a great, great life in a small space. So, you really should do your research on breed before getting a cat, and don't just throw it by the wayside. So, while breeds do share general traits of behavior, of course, there's still that fact that cats have their own personalities. So, it's not like every cat of the same breed will be a carbon copy of the last cat before it, you know? They have their own personalities, but cats of the same breed will still have general personality traits that they'll share, and this is something that you absolutely should research before getting a cat. For example, I picked my cat when adopting because he was a Russian Blue, which I knew do very well in apartments, can be happy in small spaces, are a good beginner cat, and a generally calm breed. And that has led me to have a great experience with owning a cat so far. So I'll say it again. Research the breed before getting your cat. So with that, let's move on to myth number 2. That cats are nocturnal and will keep you up all night. Is it true? Well, I mean, yes and no. Sorta, kinda. I'd say kinda. Because the thing is, yes, okay, cats are nocturnal by nature, but they don't always stay nocturnal. A cat can actually become diurnal or crepuscular. Crepuscular, by the way, is more active in the dawn and dusk times of day, the morning and the evening. Really, it depends on the owner more than it depends on the cat. And the reason is that if you train your cat right, if you schedule them right, if you do things right, you can get your cat off of that nocturnal habit, but it might take some patience and it might take some time, and you have to know what you're doing. So I'll try and help you out with that. So an important thing to remember, and this is something I see a lot of people get wrong, an important thing to remember is that if you want your cat, this is just general, not even just at night, but if you want to make sure that your cat isn't just keeping you up all night, misbehaving, jumping on the furniture, running around in circles, then you have to remember, don't give your cat any attention for misbehaving. Even negative attention can actually be a very bad thing for you. Don't give your cat any attention for misbehaving at night. So, why might that be? Well, while it can be hard to try and ignore your cat if they're keeping you up after a long day and you just want to get some sleep and they're meowing and they're running in circles, it can be hard to resist the urge to glare at them or throw something nearby or clap your hands, try and get them to stop. No, because cats are kind of like kids in that regard. When they misbehave, a lot of the time they're trying to get your attention. So if you give them attention for misbehaving, you're telling them, hey, if you want my attention, you will misbehave, you will get it, you know? If you want my attention, you'll get it by misbehaving. And obviously that's not what you want. You want the opposite of that. You don't want your cat to be misbehaving. So even if you give them negative attention for misbehaving at night, that still tells your cat, hey, if I want my owner's attention, all I gotta do is misbehave, which is what you don't want. So, remember, don't give them any attention for misbehaving at night. Okay, so, what else do you need to know? Well, you have to know that what you do with your cat during the day also impacts how your cat behaves at night. If you do things right during the day, it can lead to a better nighttime experience. There's a lot of things you should know. I mean, not a lot, but there's a few things you should know about how to behave with your cat during the day to lead to a better nighttime experience. So, what can you do during the day to help your cat leave you alone better at night? Well, a few things. So one thing to do is to get your cat on a schedule, which includes waking them up at different points during the day for play and interaction. Now, a lot of people think that's mean. A lot of people think that's rude. Whenever I tell someone, like, oh yeah, I wake my cat up in the day to play with them and to make sure they're sleeping through the night, they go, that's so mean, you know, that's so mean. You're awake, leave your cat be, let them sleep. But actually, the thing is with cats, is that this is just a temporary thing that actually helps them get on a better sleep schedule, which leads to the cat's mental health being better. They're up when you're up, you can interact with them, you never get angry at your cat because you sleep through the night, at least for waking you up in the night, and it just leads to a better experience for the both of you, for physically and mentally. You're up to play with them during the day, they don't bother you at night. It's just better for the both of you, and it's worth waking your cat up every once in a while during the day for some playtime. They'll actually appreciate it. Another thing you can do is schedule your cat right. If you get your cat on a schedule where they know this is playtime, this is sleep time, it can really help avoid nighttime incidents. Really, there's many ways of doing this, but my particular way includes making sure that my cat knows once the lights go out at the same time daily, that means it's time for bed. No more play, no more attention. No matter what my cat does, he's not going to get my attention, so he might as well sleep through the night, get up in the day, and we can spend a nice long day together. So the way I do this is by implementing a few techniques. Get your cat on a schedule so they know exactly when the time is for bed, when they're getting fed, so they won't, if they know when they're going to get fed or get water, they're not going to wake you up in the night trying to get food because they know exactly when they're going to get food next. If they know it's time for bed, they're not going to get attention, they're going to not do attention-seeking behavior because they know it's futile, meaning you'll get more peace and quiet. So another great thing to do in this is to make sure that your schedule includes playtime for your cat, because playing with your cat is one of the best ways to get them to sleep through the night. Ideally, you should play with your cat for around 20 to 30 minutes each time you play with them. Really, some people say 15 minutes each time you play with them. You should really be doing 2 sort of 15 to 30 minute playtime sessions with your cat per day. And try and get one of those right before bedtime. Play with your cat and really play with your cat. I mean, play with them. Don't just play a 2-minute game of paw at the feather, Really play with them. Get them jumping, pouncing, running around, tiring themselves out. And then, here's a trick. Give them a treat at the end. Put away their things that they would jump on, towers, all that. Leave up like a tower for them to sleep in. I put away the tunnels, I put away all that, so they know it's bedtime. Give them a treat and feed them their largest meal of the day right before bed. This is something a lot of people suggest because that's an indicator to cats that it's time for sleep. It helps to tire them out, and it's just a very generally recommended thing to do. Feed your cat their biggest meal of the day at bedtime. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's just move on to the third and final myth, and this is a big one. This is a really big one. The third and final myth that we're going to be discussing right now is cats need to go outside. So, a lot of people will tell you this. A lot of people will tell you that cats need to have at least some outside time in order to be happy and live a happy, healthy life. So, is this true? I mean, people will tell you this all the time, but really it's because they're too quick to make assumptions or put their mind in the cat's mind and come to a conclusion. The answer, is it true? No, it's not. Indisputably, it's not. While some cats enjoy going outside, and some breeds and personalities do more than others, it's not true at all that they need to go outside, and in fact, many discourage letting cats outside. However, many uninformed people and owners might assume that a cat can't be happy living indoors because they're an animal and it'd be cruel to keep them inside. But typically that's just them saying, if I was a cat, I'd want to go outside. But they're not a cat and they can't think like a cat. So don't use that as your reasoning. As harmless as it might seem to let your kitty outside, it opens up a can of worms that includes risks like your cat contracting illnesses or diseases. Going outside, they risk picking up illnesses like ticks, fleas, ear mites, intestinal worms, and one that hits close to home, ringworm, among others. An indoor cat is much less likely to contract these illnesses in your home. And from someone who's had to deal with ringworm in cats, let me tell you, if you can avoid that experience, avoid that experience. There are many more risks to letting your cat outside, a huge one being cars. Cats unfortunately get hit by cars or hide under cars in dangerous locations all the time. It's a huge risk. More risks include possible strangulation risk if they don't have a breakaway collar, which you always should have, by the way, and get caught on a branch or some object, and if they do, and the collar breaks away as it's designed to do, good, your cat's not dying, but now they are out without a collar. It might look like a stray and can't be identified unless they're chipped. Someone sees them and decides to bring them to a clinic to be scanned. So that's another risk. Another risk includes that they can get lost. Sure, cats have a great sense of direction, but they wander too far and get lost all the time. There's a reason why you see all those missing cat posters all over the place. It is a risk. And even if your cat does know the way home, if they get stuck or caught in something or somewhere, then they can't come home even if they know where it is. That's a risk too. There's even more risks to letting a cat outside, including cats being outside without bell collars, which some owners don't use because they incorrectly think they'd annoy the cat with the jingling, or just don't do it out of laziness or ignorance before letting their cat out, and they risk their cat doing a lot of harm to the ecosystem. There's a reason so many cat toys are designed like rodents and birds. It's because cats hunt them by instinct. That's what they hunt. So if you let your cat out without a bell collar to warn the wildlife, then even a single cat can do a lot of damage to the local ecosystem, which is a huge risk. It's another thing to consider. And on top of this, there's even more risks, like exposing your cat to toxic plants or substances. Some people might have toxic plants growing, or they might be growing in the wild, and can be dangerous if your cat is exposed to them. And it's also very dangerous if your cat is exposed to some toxic substance like antifreeze, which can be potentially fatal. So that's another huge risk. On top of this, there are many toxic plants and substances that are really, really common, like lilies. Lilies are a very common garden flower that are toxic to plants, and your cat could easily stumble across someone's garden while out and about. That's a huge risk. So, what do I take away from this? Well, I'll leave you with this little message. The Chicago Paws organization even claims that the average lifespan for an outdoor cat is only 1 to 3 years, as compared to a 15-year lifespan on average for an indoor cat. You can see how big of a difference that makes. So, while there's a benefit to letting cats outside, it's not necessary. Just create a stimulating enough indoor environment and your cat will be just fine. So now that you know some myths about cats, let's talk about what you really should be considering when you get a cat. One is how you get a cat. Adoption is a great way to go, and there are tons of cats in need of a new owner. Adoption can be a great and enriching experience for the both of you. Another thing to consider is your space. Cats don't need a lot of space. So if anyone ever tells you a cat must be depressed in a small space like an apartment, they're probably just speaking from their human, a mansion is better than an apartment point of view. But again, cats don't think that way. Cats can be perfectly happy so long as they have around 18 square feet of space at minimum per cat that you own. And really, it's what's in your house that's bigger than how big it is. It's not about size here. So, make sure your cat has everything it needs. And make sure it has hiding places, plenty of opportunity for physical and mental stimulation, and a cat can be perfectly happy in a small space like an apartment. However, you should still consider space, as you have to have at least the bare minimum space to get a cat, and that space increases per cat that you should consider. So, third thing to consider is time investment. You need to make sure you can give your cat the appropriate amount of time that it needs. While cats are independent creatures, it's important that they spend enough time with you, and some breeds like the Ragdoll are infamous for getting lonely even when you're just taking a shower for a few minutes. It's a time investment that should be considered, because many people just get a cat and think the cat can just sustain itself in the background while they go out for work all day or don't come home all night, and really a lot of people don't consider the time investment, but you really need to. So, this time investment changes by various factors, such as breeds, since different breeds require different time investment, number of cats in the home, as they can play with each other, but again, both cats need time with you. There is the personality, since some cats are more independent than others, and the kitten's age, as kittens can't be left alone for as long as adult cats, and the time that they can safely be left alone for grows as they age, and sort of usually hits a cutoff point, which you should research. So, make sure you're willing and able to put in the necessary time investment to get a cat. Another thing to consider is financial investment. Make sure you can afford a cat and all of the necessary vet bills, necessities, vaccinations, and more. Along with making sure you always have food and litter in stock. So, if you don't have that money, you shouldn't get a cat. That's not to say you wouldn't be a good owner if you did. But cats have needs, and those needs cost money. So make sure that you have the resources in order to get everything a cat needs and manage cat upkeep. So the rest of the things that you need to know before getting a cat, kind of just have to make sure with making sure that you know what a cat needs and how to take care of a cat, which we'll discuss. So on that note, we'll move on to the having a cat stage. Hooray! Now you've got a cat. What do you need to know? Well, you have to have everything a cat needs. Here's what you'll need with some discussion. And keep in mind, I will discuss some behavioral aspects for some of these things, like litter boxes, for example, in the cat behavior section of this video. So wait for that and keep that in mind. So with that in mind, let's discuss what you'll need. The first thing is a carrier, and I'd also recommend getting a kennel too, since you'll need to have one to take your cat to the vet and other places. And I recommend a kennel or enclosed space, maybe made of canvas or specifically designed for a cat, as cats going through specific procedures need to have a space to rest and recover, with limited possibility of strenuous exercise, which can impair their healing or even ruin their healing process entirely. So that's something to be considered. Another thing that should be considered is food and water bowls. An important thing to keep in mind is that a cat's diet is something to be considered. There's generally two major types of cat food, dry food and wet food, and they each have their own advantages and disadvantages. Dry food is just as the name implies. It's cat food served in a dry form like pellets, and as for its pros, it has an easy sort of form to measure out. It doesn't smell as bad as wet food typically. It can often be bought in bigger bulk. It's generally cheaper. It has better food safety since it can be left out for like the whole day as compared to wet food, which shouldn't be left out for more than some hours. It is more convenient generally. It is better for the cat's teeth on average since it can help scrape away some plaque. And it has even more pros that you should research too. But it has cons as well, just like wet food, and those cons typically include that it contains less moisture, it's lower in protein and higher in carbs, which may lead to some health problems if not monitored. And this is more of a problem with the owner than with dry food, is that since dry food can be left out all day, many owners might just fall prey to pouring a huge bowl of dry food and leaving it all day, which can lead to some obesity problems. So if your owner just measures it out, then it's fine and that con can go away, but it is something to be considered that dry food might lead an owner to make the mistake of leaving so much food out just all day. Okay, now let's move on to wet food. And wet food is also just like it sounds. It's cat food served in a more moisture-rich form like canned food. And it also has its pros and cons. So, as for its pros, it has more moisture, it's easier to eat for cats with dental problems or missing teeth. It is often chosen by picky eater cats more than dry food. And more. It contains more protein as well. However, like dry food, it has its cons. A good few disadvantages, including that it's generally more expensive, smells much worse, is sold in smaller containers, can't be left out too long or else sickness or mold could ensue. It can be messy, it won't help a cat's teeth like dry food will, among other things. On top of this, there are other factors about dry and wet food that you should really consider, and the brand is also something to consider as well. But all in all, both are good choices when done right, and really you shouldn't feel bad about picking one over the other. So just keep that in mind. If you do it right, both wet food and dry food are both great options to feed your cat. Okay, so just make sure you're not feeding your cat irresponsibly, which I urge you to research to make sure, as there's many intricacies which would be too much to explain in this video. Another thing to note about food for cats is that you shouldn't respond to a cat meowing for food, because that will just mean that every time your cat wants food, they're gonna meow because they think that's how they get it. It's the same thing with misbehaving at night. If your cat meows or misbehaves for food and you give it to them, in their mind they're going, oh, if I want food, I've gotta misbehave and meow and make sorts of trouble and noise, and that's not what you want. So remember, never give a cat attention or what it wants for bad behavior, because that's just gonna lead to more bad behavior to try and get what they want. Something else to note is the age of your cat. This video is not about kitten care, as kitten care is an entirely different ballpark. So this is for cats and kittens past a certain age, usually around 6 to 8 weeks of age plus. Kittens need to eat different food than grown cats, and you need to make sure that you are doing this. So if your kitten is at the age where they can start eating food from a bowl, make sure that until they're around 12 months of age that they are eating kitten food. Since actually kitten food and cat food are two different things. Kitten food is similar to cat food, but it contains more calories than cat food since growing kittens need more. But once they reach around maturity, around 12 months of age, at that point they really don't need those extra calories, and all those extra calories do is just lead to more weight problems. So make sure that you change the cat's food from kitten food to cat food gradually or when they turn around 12 months of age. Okay, so you might be wondering why the switch has to be gradual. You know, why can't I just change my cat's food one day? Well, this is something I unfortunately had to learn the hard way. Suddenly switching a cat's diet, even just switching the brands of a similar food, can lead to digestive issues for the cat, which leads to nausea, vomiting, among other things. I can tell you this time, it's true. I've seen it firsthand. So, do some research on the best method to switch a cat's food. Typically it takes around a week to 10 days, and the usual strategy is to gradually sort of ratio out this new food into the old food more and more each day for around a week to 10 days generally, and over time this just makes a better gradual transition, and eventually the ratio will go to where you're only giving them the new food, you've taken out the old food, and now they've switched well and haven't had to go through all that digestive trouble, vomiting and all. Trust me, it's not something that you want to deal with. Okay, so this might be something you're wondering about feeding your cats. You might be wondering, can I give my cat human food? Well, generally, I would say no. You probably shouldn't, but there are some foods that are technically safe to give your cat, like some fish, some meats, and among other things, but generally I wouldn't recommend it. While there are some human foods, again, that they can eat, keep in mind, while there are some foods they can eat, that doesn't mean it's recommended. So, I mean, sort of what's the big deal? You might be thinking, what is the problem here? Why is it not recommended? Why should I be concerned about feeding my cat human food, or why should I just be careful about it? Well, there's a lot of things about human food that can lead to issues for cats. You know, there's even some times where, you know, there's ingredients that you don't think about that can actually be harmful to the cat. And a lot of times what ends up happening is that their cat suffers from health issues from human food, but the thing is, they felt safe feeding this cat this food because it technically wasn't poisonous, you know? They looked up, is this food poisonous to cats? They found no, it isn't, and they fed it to them, but they didn't think about the fact that while it wasn't poisonous, it was just really unhealthy. So there's a lot of intricacies that you need to keep in mind that can be avoided by just sticking to the cat food. So, I mean, here's an example, okay? Pepperoni. While pepperoni is technically okay to give your cat depending on the spices, it might lead some people to feed it to their cat, and while it's not poisonous to the cat, it contains a ton of sodium, which is really, really unhealthy for the cat. But some people might still feed it because they looked it up and it said, oh, pepperoni's not poisonous. So keep in mind, even if it's not poisonous, it might still be really unhealthy. And even still, there's a lot of misconceptions on websites that try and tell you what human foods you can feed your cat. I mean, if you're doing a lot of research and trying to be absolutely safe, doing it in moderation, you've done so much research, you're making you're making sure you're absolutely sure you can do some foods in moderation, but I mean, keep in mind, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, there's so many articles I saw that were labeled clickbait titles like 10 foods your cat will absolutely love you for, that had foods that you actually shouldn't feed a cat on it. I mean, one article I saw recommended giving a cat cheese, which, while technically not poisonous to a cat to my knowledge, is probably a bad idea because most cats are actually lactose intolerant, so that probably isn't a good idea to give your cat cheese, but it's on these websites that say, feed this to your cat, they'll love it, which you gotta be careful about. Do a lot of research. Also, still somehow, even though most cats are lactose intolerant, that whole stereotype of leaving a dish of milk out for a cat still persists to this day for some reason. It's very strange. Alright, another thing to note is that you should try to feed them on a schedule for the best results for their physical and mental health. Since free feeding, the act of just having a bunch of food out for the cat to eat whenever they want, can lead to higher rates of obesity in cats. Another thing to remember is you should always have the food and water bowls in the same place, so cats always know where they are. Now about water, this is going to be a very short discussion, unless your vet specifically, personally, and medically recommends that your cat shouldn't have water for X period of time. As a professional medical opinion, your cat should always have at least some water in their bowl at all times. Okay, now moving on to the other things you'll need. Another huge one is a litter box, and there's more to it than you might expect. Just like how cats can be picky about the food they eat, they can also be picky about litter and litter boxes. Now, fortunately, I haven't had many bad litter experiences with my cat, but they do happen with cats here and there. We're going to go over what I call the 3 L's to remember about litter for cats. Litter, litter box, and location. So number 1, litter. It might surprise you to know that there's different kinds of litter. Many people think litter only comes in different brands, not different types, but that's not true. The difference between a clay litter and a pine litter might seem insignificant to us, but it's kind of like Coke and Pepsi. They are both colas, so they have a lot in common, but there's also a lot that sets them apart. Except unlike Pepsi and Coke, there's no clear winners with litter. Pepsi is better is what I'm saying, but anyways. Anyway, it might seem to you like these different litters are just, the same thing with a different label on it, but the difference is actually really big for them. It's like night and day, 1 and 0, black and white, blue and orange, it's a huge difference for them. I can't go over all the different types and subtypes of cat litter and all their sort of benefits and what they are, so you should do your own research, but I'll talk about some things you need to know and how you can tell if your cat likes the litter. So, how can I tell if my cat likes the litter I got him? Well, if a cat doesn't like the litter, then he'll display certain behaviors that can clue you into that fact. For example, a cat who doesn't like the litter which you gave them might perch on the edge of the litter box so they don't have to go in, which can lead to higher rates of accidents and also is a clue that they don't like the litter you're giving them. Another thing that might happen is a more extreme case where they avoid the litter box entirely, which leads to them having accidents outside the box, which is not great for anyone. Of course, that's a bad thing. So another thing to keep in mind is sneezing too much in or around the litter box, which might indicate that the cat thinks the litter is too dusty, which isn't always true if they're just sneezing around the litter box. It could be they just need to sneeze or have some other thing going on, but excessive sneezing in or around the litter box can be a sign of litter that is very possibly too dusty. So what else do I need to know about litter? Well, might see vigorous paw shaking after using the litter box, which can indicate the cat is vigorously trying to get any and all of the unpleasant litter off of them. And they may also use the litter box even if they don't like the litter, but will just go in, do their business, and dash out without covering it up, which is another telltale sign, since by instinct cats will cover their litter. So if your cat just goes in, does their business, and dashes out without covering it up, even though they're using it, that can still be a sign that they don't like the litter. So, okay, if you have litter that your cat does like, ideally they'll only go in the litter box. They'll go in, use it, cover it up, and they won't vigorously shake their paws or bolt out or anything like that. Okay, so do your research on litter before getting it and pay attention to your cat's response to the litter, and keep in mind that you have to do litter upkeep. Okay, it means you should scoop your litter with a scooper at least once a day, and you need to change it entirely every so often. How often changes with many factors, but often it's around once a week that you should entirely change your cat's litter. If your cat's litter box isn't kept clean, then the rate of accidents increases, and it's not good for your cat's mental health, and it just smells so much worse. So keep up the maintenance of your cat's litter box. Okay. So, let's move on to the next L, okay? Let's move on to the next L, the litter box. Like litter boxes have a lot that sets them apart. And actually, if your cat is having bathroom troubles, it might be because of the litter box, even if they like the litter. So, things to consider include the size of the box, since bigger cats need bigger boxes. All the way up to the Maine Coon, you need to make sure you have a box big enough to accommodate your cat. So here's the thing. If it's too small, the cat might be reluctant or even unable to use the box. And if it's too big, then you're spending extra unnecessary money on all that extra litter to pad out the box. So you really want to make sure you have the best possible size of litter box for your cat. So some say the ideal box size for a cat should be at least as long as your cat from nose to tail tip with their tail extended, and at least as wide as your cat is long with their tail tip not extended. That is what some sources say is the ideal size, but other sources differ. Do your research. So consider the height of the litter box too, since it is definitely something that can also lead to some trouble if not considered. The height of your cat's litter box is important. So some reasons why is that cats that are too young or too small or have medical issues like broken bones or arthritis, among other things, may be unable to get up into a box if it's too high. But you also need a box that's not too low, or else more litter spillage occurs. So consider the type of litter box too. There's covered, uncovered, even automatic litter boxes, but cats have preferences, and some cats won't do their litter or won't do their business in one type, or will only do it in another. So it is something to be watched out for. Okay, keep in mind what kind of litter box you have too. Okay, so something to consider is how many pets you have, how many cats you have. Since while multiple cats can share a litter box without issues, sometimes it can lead to cats fighting or one or both cats choosing not to use the box, which is no good. Actually, while my cat has had no trouble with it, some say there's a rule for how many litter boxes your cat should have, where a rule of thumb is that you should have a +1 rule of litter boxes, which is where that you have 1 litter box per cat and an extra. So if you have 2 cats, you should have 3 litter boxes. 4, you should have 5. 1 cat, you should have 2. They say this because some cats apparently won't do number 1 and number 2 in the same litter box. My cat doesn't do that, but apparently some cats will, so that is something to keep in mind. Okay, so what else to consider? Let's move on to the final L that we will be discussing, location. Okay, so now some owners, when considering where to put the litter box, they won't really put much thought into it. They'll just choose wherever it won't smell the most, end of story. But it makes a huge difference to your cat where the litter box is. So, for example, there's a general rule with cats that you should never put the litter box beside their food and water bowls, since cross-contamination from the litter can lead to your cat getting sick. And it's also important because cats naturally do their business away from where they eat for survival reasons. So to avoid confusion and reluctance from your cat, just separate the box and the food. Okay, so where should I put a litter box? Well, you should put it somewhere private, since cats naturally have a fear of being ambushed while vulnerable. So having it somewhere private is important. On a similar note, a quiet spot works best so as not to stress out the cat even more. Like I said, also make sure that it's put away from the food and water bowls. Put it somewhere accessible, so if you have a small kitten, injured cat, or old cat, make sure they're able to access the litter box and it isn't up a flight of stairs or somewhere else unreachable. So, on top of this, you should always have access to the litter box, right? The cat should always be able to access it no matter the time of day. They should always have access to the litter box. Never close them off from it. This is also a general rule of thumb. On that note, like with food and water bowls, always keep the litter box in the same place so your cat always knows where it is. A final thing your cat will need is a vet. In case of injury or illness, do research and find a good, accessible vet. I also recommend having a local animal emergency hotline and animal poison hotline in your phone, in your contacts, just in case of emergency, so you can get to them as quickly as possible and contact them as quickly as possible so as to avoid any wasted time. That's a recommendation from me to you. Okay, so the next things that we'll discuss are technically not needs in the sense that cats can live without them, but I'd argue they are a necessity for your cat to live a happy and healthy life. So what are they? The first of these things is spaying or neutering your cat. And this one is really important because while a cat can live without it, after all, not all owners do the responsible thing of spaying or neutering their cat, it is really important. Here are just some of the benefits that come from spaying or neutering your cat, and bear with me because there's a lot of benefits. Spayed and neutered cats live longer on average. They're less likely to spray and mark territory. They can become calmer and less aggressive. They can't reproduce. Spayed cats can become less vocal. They're free of their heat cycles, which can cause them to act more aggressively and tolls on their mental health. They're less likely to get into fights, reduces the risk of mammary, uterine, and ovarian cancer, on top of reducing the risk of pyometra, which is a life-threatening infection. It lowers the risk of escape. Other operations can be done at the same time, like microchips, teeth cleaning, hernia work, and more. It prevents accidental pregnancies, helps overpopulation, and reduces the risk of strays and animals getting into fights with strays, and more. So sure, there are some risks to a procedure like spaying and neutering, such as reactions to prescribed drugs, anesthesia, and infection, and you should always talk to a vet first, but in general, the benefits way outweigh the risks. Another thing that you really should have is grooming tools, as this vastly increases the quality of life for both you and your pet. So every little bit helps, and it's recommended to get your cat on a regular grooming routine. Remember, short-haired cats need less brushing than medium-haired cats, who in turn need less brushing than long-haired cats, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't brush your medium or short-haired cats. They should get it too. So, this helps your cat remove dirt and debris from their coat, which lessens the risk of hairballs, which nobody likes dealing with. Research the amount of time per week and per session that you should spend grooming your cat. So it's something that will differ between breed and hair size, and it's really just your time availability. Research this. Make sure to research this. It just leads to a better quality of life, less cat hair floating around, less hairballs. It's just really something that you should do. So, as for bathing, this one isn't really a necessity. Typically you don't have to bathe your cat, but if it's vet prescribed, then you may have to bathe your cat as directed, and good luck, because I've been there. If you have a long-haired cat, you might want to look into fur clipping as well, since your cat might benefit from it. And you also might want to look in general for not just long-haired cats, cats in general, clipping your cat's nails here and there, since unlike declawing, trimming is completely humane, and actually a regular old nail clipper can do the job just fine. It's what I use. Just make sure that you don't clip the part of the cat's claw called the quick, which is that pinkish red part sort of closer to their hand in the lower part of their nail. Make sure you don't cut that. It's got blood vessels, it's got nerves, it'll mean bleeding, a lot of pain. If you cut above the quick, you and your cat will be just fine. And it's a great way to make sure your cat isn't always having these razor sharp claws that tear into you or tear into things, so it's really just a good time investment. Okay, so another thing you really should have are things to mentally and physically stimulate your cat. Things like cat toys, cat towers, interactive toys, perches, tunnels, or whatever else. These are pretty much a must-have for a cat, so they maintain a good physical and mental health, as without them a cat can easily become both very unhealthy and extremely depressed. While all cats differ in their preferences, there's plenty of options to try out. I recommend cat towers in high places personally, since cats love high places because it gives them a good vantage point, and my cat is always running up and down his tower, jumping onto the bed for fun. Another toy I recommend personally are cat springs, which are really cheap, and both my cat and my brother's cat absolutely love them. They're just very cheap, they come in bulk, they're little sort of rubbery plastic springs, and you can either let your cat play with them on their own, they can bat it around, I see my cat running with it all the time, or you can, you can throw it for your cat, and they love chasing it, they love bringing it back. You can even play fetch. And well, not all cats will like the toy, of course, they have preferences. Both my cat and my brothers have absolutely loved it from what I've seen, and it's been one of the highest recommended toys I've seen personally. So it's one that I recommend. Okay, many sources recommend, as for the time investment, many sources recommend playing with your cat for at least twice a day, and having each of those sessions last around 15 to 20 minutes, but there's no exact amount of time that your cat should be played with, and there's no exact amount of time that your cat should not have access to things. What I'm trying to say is that really your cat should have access to toys it can entertain itself with, even when you're not playing with it. So, that's another reason why those cat springs are so great, personally, is that you can throw them around, your cat can run and chase them, then you can go stop playing with them, and they'll continue to bat it around. So, remember, even when you're not playing with them and with those interactive toys in their play sessions, they should still have access to toys to play with on their own. Right, okay. And also, cardboard boxes. That's another thing that I recommend. Cardboard boxes are a great and inexpensive cat toy, and they're great for being innovative and making creative toys because you can easily work them into a larger project or just tweak them a little. I mean, I have a toy that's literally just a cardboard box. I cut a little doorway in, a little arch that my cat loves to run in and pounce out and sled around in. So cardboard boxes are a great, inexpensive, and easy to innovate cat toy. So I'd highly recommend them. And okay, on the subject of cat furniture and items for cats, you should also get a scratching post for your cat, whether it be a standalone post or a post that's integrated with another piece of furniture like a cat tower. A scratching post of some sort is important and is actually somewhat related to the myth of cats being destructive. This is because cats have a natural urge to scratch, since it helps keep their claws clean and helps to mark territory. So without being properly introduced to one, it can lead to cats focusing their scratching impulses elsewhere onto things like your furniture, which is part of why some people think that cats will always be destructive to furniture. But that's not true if they're introduced to their post properly, which I'll kind of discuss dealing with cat behavior and all that later in the video. So I'm sure by now you've waited long enough for the cat behavior section, and I hope it doesn't disappoint, because we're now going to discuss some different cat behaviors, what they mean, and how to help influence their behavior for the better. So the first thing we'll discuss is some cat body language, since obviously cats can't speak to tell you what's on their mind, so knowing at least the basics of cat body language can help you get some insight into how your cat's doing. So we're going to work down the cat's anatomy piece by piece to tell you about some factors of cat body language and what they mean, starting right up front with the cat's eyes. Now keep in mind that many cat body language cues can mean one thing, but can also easily be misinterpreted. So take each of these with a bit of a grain of salt when assessing your cat, but they're generally pretty accurate. So what can your cat's eyes tell you? Well, pay attention to their eye, and in particular their eye, their eyelids, and their pupils, since all of them convey information, but also keep in mind that even so many people and sources debate on what those sort of pieces of information they transfer actually mean. So remember, I'll say it again, some of these aren't definitive, but are fairly accurate in determining a cat's mood and state of mind. So what can your cat's eyes tell you? Okay, pay attention. Let's talk about the pupils first, okay? Another big indicator of a cat's mood, mental health, and all that is the dilation or size of its pupils, right? So if your cat's pupils are really dilated, it often indicates your cat is excited. Not always happy excited, it's more of an emotional excitement, and it kind of depends on the context. So it might be excitement from happiness or fear, good excitement, something else. Typically, excitement or fear are the two emotional extremes signaled by wide dilated pupils. Now, on the other hand of the dilation spectrum, you have constricted pupils, when their pupils become very small and thin like a slit. Now, this signals a sort of emotional arousal of sorts, typically often anger or fear or pleasure, and you can use the appearance or absence of other behaviors like hissing or growling to try and deduce just which one it is. If the pupils are narrow and their eyes are squinted, that's typically a sign of aggression, since the squinting is believed to help protect the cat's eyes from an opponent's claws. And so keep that in mind. And it's kind of similar to the way in which a great white shark rolls their eyes back in order to sort of protect their eyes from prey when they bite down on it. You know, the cats have these behaviors that they do to try and protect their eyes from an opponent, and you can sort of watch out for that. So, what else do you need to know? Well, that you need to know that constricted pupils aren't always a bad sign. They can actually be a good sign too. You know, it really depends on the context and the other features. So the constricted pupils actually can be a good sign that they're happy if it's met with, you know, purring or other relaxed body features. So keep that in mind. Okay. So if you ever look at your cat's pupils and notice that one is of a different dilation than the other, you know, they're dilated to different sizes, then you might want to contact your vet, because this is a condition known as anisocoria, which is a possible symptom of some kind of disease, possibly even a serious one. Now onto your cat's eyelids. If your cats are kind of around with their eyelids hanging heavy, then it's sort of a, you know, like a half-closed, sort of squinted kind of look. It's a good thing, and it typically means your cat is happy or relaxed. If they act in this manner close to you or around you, then it might be a good sign that your cat trusts you, at least to some degree. Oh, speaking of trust, you might want to exercise some caution when you try to read a cat's eyes, since some dogs and cats and other animals, you know, prolonged eye contact can be taken as a threat. So if you stare at them trying to read their eyes, some cats, not all cats, might take that as a challenge. Keep that in mind when trying to read your cat's eyes. Okay, so, fun fact about cat's eyes and cat's eyelids. Cats actually have a third eyelid, you know, top, bottom. They actually have a third eyelid, which you can kind of see if their eyes are stretched, or you can see in some instances in medical conditions and scenarios, and it's called a nictitating membrane. It is used sometimes in some situations to help protect a cat's eye further in certain situations. And actually, here's the real cool part. Have you ever looked at your eye and noticed that little fleshy thing in the corner of your eye, your human eye? That's actually a remnant of a nictitating membrane that ancient human ancestors used to have. So we don't have one anymore, but you can still see that little pink fleshy thing in the corner of your eye, which is the remnant of an evolutionary feature that us modern humans don't have anymore for one reason or another. So that's just a cool fact that I wanted to mention. Okay, so back to the cat behavior. Alright, so another thing to look for in a cat's eyes is their blinking. If a cat blinks at you or some other animal with a slow, even fluttering blink, it means that your cat is communicating affection. And you can even use this to communicate with your own cat by trying to blink to them in a slow manner, and you can actually convey a direct message to your cat that you're sending them affection, you know? So it's really cool because it's one of the few ways you can actually directly communicate with your cat. So by the same token, very rapid blinks, along with other negative body behaviors, can mean sort of fear and nervousness, since they don't want to take their eyes off of whatever they're looking at for even a moment. They're blinking rapidly because they're intimidated, they're fearful, they're nervous, they don't want to take their eyes off it, you know? So keep in mind for that one, and it can also be associated with other bodily cues. Okay, so a cat's eyes have a cue that many owners often miss, and that is a blink, right? Many people often miss the cat blink. They'll mistake it for a wink, or they just won't be looking, or maybe their cat doesn't do it, but the blink is a recognized cat behavior, and it's actually a good sign, so be happy if your cat winks. Usually it means, like, trust, and it's a good thing. Again, it's a good thing. Cat winking, good thing. So, now that we've discussed the eyes, let's move up the head to talk about the ears. Okay. With the cat's ears, pay attention to the position and angle of your cat's ears, since that conveys a lot of information. If your cat's ears are up and facing mostly forward, then that's a good sign that your cat is relaxed or content or even playful. So if your cat's ears are up and face forward, that's a good sign. But if your cat's ears are really standing straight up, that might mean they're on high alert. And that's not always a bad thing, but it could be. So again, keep that in mind. Up and forward is good. Straight up might mean they're on high alert for something in either a good way or a bad way. Okay, but not always. So there's other positions that you need to know. There is when they turn their ears sort of sideways, and this isn't always a sign of the same sort of thing. Sometimes it can just simply be them trying to listen better to a noise that's coming more from their sides, and that might be all there is to it. But there's also a very, very, very well-known cat ear behavior that is sort of related to the cat turning its ears to the side. So if their ears are turned back, that is a good sign of an irritated cat. Not a good sign, but I mean that's a good indicator of an irritated cat. So keep that one in mind. And similarly, if the cat has its ears twisted to the side, slightly like I mentioned, it could be that they're just listening to a sound that's coming from their side, but it can also mean they're nervous and anxious. And the position of the cats with their ears to the side in a bad way when they're nervous is often called airplane ears, because sometimes they flatten it down with their ears to the side and it looks like the wings of a plane. This is a bad sign that can indicate nervousness, aggression, or even fear. So keep that one in mind. Okay. What else do you need to know about the ears? Well, if they have their ears flattened and to the back of their head, which is often accompanied by hissing or growling, that's the really bad one. The ears back, pressed back to the head, turned back, that's the really, really bad sign. You don't want to see that one. So keep that one in mind. And it means usually that the cat is anxious, upset, or even aggressive. So be careful. Okay, now let's move down the face to the mouth, the whiskers, and the voice. Let's begin with the mouth, since it's probably the one with the least amount of cues. So what should you be looking for in the mouth of a cat when you're trying to read its bodily cues? Well, obviously there is a closed mouth, which is typically a good sign, and it's usually just neutral. But watch out for bared teeth, as that might mean that they're not too happy in that moment, especially if accompanied with a hiss. As for their tongue, if they stick out their tongue slightly, that could be a good sign, and it might mean that your cat is sort of feeling relaxed or even curious. Okay, let's move from the mouth to the whiskers. So if your cat's whiskers are sort of out to the side, straight, and maybe a bit to the side, then that's a typically pretty good sign, and it can signal being calm, relaxed, neutral, that kind of thing. If your cat is interested, excited, or alert, they might sort of fan out its whiskers a little and bring them forward a bit. However, if a cat brings its whiskers back against its face, it's probably a sign that the cat is a bit scared. So let's move on to what might be one of the hardest and most complex to decipher cat cues out there: the voice. Now, this is one that has a lot of debate on it. There's a lot of people who disagree about what some of these mean. They usually are in a general area where they kind of know what it means, but it can also be very hard for a cat owner to differentiate. So keep that in mind. This can be one of the hardest ones to decipher, so don't feel bad if you have some trouble. Even the classic meow vocalization actually has a lot more to it than some might expect, because here's a fun fact for you. Studies have discovered that meowing is actually a vocalization reserved for interactions with humans, and often won't be used at all when interacting with other cats. Typically, when a cat meows at you, it wants something, be it food, water, play, or something else. However, even the meow vocalization itself has its intricacies, as longer meows could mean worry or loneliness, and so can your average meow. And meowing can even be a sign of sickness too, so you can see how cat vocalizations might be a bit confusing to decipher, when even the basic meow can mean everything from give me pets to I'm sick right now. It can be pretty tough. Another vocalization to watch for is the yowl, because it's a sort of more drawn-out meow, it's more melodic, and it's often a bad sign indicating worry, stress, or even territorial mating dispute, and this one is often used when cats are communicating cat to cat. If your cat is yowling excessively, you may want to take them to a vet, because it might be a medical concern. Not always, but it's always good to rule out anything medical. So, what else do you need to know? Well, a cat vocalization many owners might be familiar with is the chirp, which is pretty much what the name implies, a sort of chirping noise, and it's sort of grouped in with other sounds like chirrups or trills, which is a sort of rolled vocalization. So when it comes to interpretation, those three are kind of grouped in together as for what they might mean. So they often mean that your cat wants attention in a more definitive manner than than your average meow, and it can also indicate your cat is excited and happy. Okay, now on to a cat vocalization that you probably don't need me to clue you in on: the hiss. It's one of the most dreaded sounds for cat owners to hear, and you might guess that it typically indicates that the cat feels threatened, and will often be accompanied by other body language cues like pressed back ears, among other things. Thankfully, I've never heard my cat hissing before. On a similar note, cats can also snarl and growl to indicate anger or that they feel threatened. Something to note with all cat vocalizations is that they don't always mean the same thing. Again, I'll say it again, I'll keep saying it. Don't think that you read that just because this can be a good thing, oh, if they're doing it, it must mean they're happy, they're relaxed. No, there's so many intricacies. Again, keep that in mind. Okay? So, another thing to keep in mind is that different breeds typically have different meows. So, a meow from one cat to another will also sound different. So, you can see why it's so confusing to try and get down cat vocalizations. Okay, so there are more vocalizations that your cat may make, like chattering or silent meows, but if we discussed all of them, this video would be even longer than it already is, so we'll leave those up to you. But I've discussed some of the more important ones. Okay, what else is there to know? Well, okay, let's move on to a big one: the body and the legs. The legs and body are some of the most well-known and stereotypical cat body language cues, other than the vocalization, and it's where some of the most recognizable cues come from. If your cat is calm and relaxed, a good body language cue would be its body fairly straight, not really curved or arched in any way, maybe a little bit of curvature, but just mostly straight. That is a good sign that your cat is pretty fairly calm or neutral. But when your cat is threatened, scared cats will often arch their back outwards, they'll arch outwards, and that can mean they are threatened or scared because they're trying to make themselves look bigger and more threatening to a potential threat, and often they'll have other cues going too, like sticking out their hairs on end also to make themselves look bigger. Fun fact again about humans now: if you ever wondered why we get goosebumps, scientists think it's because when humans were much hairier, back a bunch of evolutionary stages, we would get goosebumps to make ourselves look bigger, stick the hair out, puff up, and make us look more intimidating to enemies and to threats. So that's another cool piece of human evolutionary history for you right there. It was not in the script, but I really wanted to share that with you all because I think it's pretty cool. Okay, so there's other cues too that have to do with the sort of position of their body and position of their back. They can arch their back actually inwards. So arched outwards typically can mean they are sort of threatened or angry. But if they arch it inwards, then it actually is a sign of relaxation, a good thing. Usually they'll stretch and arch their backs inwards, and that's a good thing. You want to see the inward arch. You don't want to see the outward arch. Remember that. Okay, so keep in mind that there's even more signals that you're going to need to know about your cat's legs and their body. And remember that cues can often be shown in combination, like if they arch their back, their hairs go up on end, they hiss, their ears go back against their head. They can be shown in combination, and that usually will make it a little easier to decipher what it is they mean. Another huge body language cue is when your cat, while still awake, shrinks down into kind of like a ball, almost appearing small. And that can mean your cat is anxious and that it's positioning itself in a way so that it can easily spring away if it feels it to be necessary. So this is not a good sign either. As for your cat's legs, pay attention because the position of your cat's legs when they sleep can actually tell you a lot. And if your cat sleeps with its legs tucked in, then that's often a good sign that the cat is comfortable. Another big body behavior to discuss is that if your cat ever rolls over onto its back, something my cat does very often, it's a very good sign. And it often means that your cat trusts you, since it puts itself in a somewhat vulnerable position. But taking that opportunity to pet their stomach, while they're rolled over is not always a good decision, and it's why some cat owners and sub-cat specialists call that cat rolled over position as the Venus cat trap. Since actually, while it is usually a sign of affection and that they trust you because they're rolling over, putting themselves in a vulnerable position, if you take that opportunity to then like touch them, rub them all over while they're in that position, it can seem to them like you're violating that sense of trust. They're trusting you to leave them be while they're on their back, and then if you go in and touch them and rub them all over and annoy them, then you've then broken that trust. Not all cats are like that, but some cats are, so that's why some owners call it the Venus cat trap, but this isn't always the case. My cat, for example, loves being pet when rolled over, and will often do it to try and get pets. However, this actually can be a bad sign, though, when they roll on their back. Typically it isn't, but it might mean that they are defensive and getting its claws at the ready, but typically when they just does it around you, usually it'll mean that they trust you, but not always. So okay, the last bit of cat behavior we'll discuss is the tail. Because a cat's tail can be very expressive, but also very confusing. A cat's tail can display good signs such as trust and comfort, such as if it wraps its tail around you, or flicks its tail. If it wraps its tail around you. But it can also display signs of discomfort, such as flicking its tail. Don't confuse this bad flicking of the tail with the good vibrating of the tail, since a vibrating tail is a good thing and sort of displays the opposite emotion as the bad flicking tail. If your cat's tail is doing neither and is very still and it's down and tucked to their body, it might be a sign of an anxious cat. Okay, that's the cat behavior section down and through now, and our last section will begin right now. And it'll be the last section before we discuss what an average day one might expect owning a cat might be. With a little lesson about me to you, with dealing with one of the most common cat medical conditions, ringworm. And this can infect humans too, so you may want to listen up. Ringworm might sound like a worm, after all it's in the name, but it's actually a fungus, and a very common one at that. After all, it's the same fungus that causes both jock itch and athlete's foot, among other things. Ringworm is not only common, but it can be transmitted between different animals. It's what's known as a zoonotic condition because it can spread among different animals, including humans, dogs, and other creatures. While indoor cats are much less likely to get it than outdoor cats, they can still get it if exposed to spores from the outside, or you've touched some and you have it on your hands, or you've got infected, or there's another infected animal. So an indoor cat can still get it, but they're much less likely to get it on their own, and they're much less likely to be the first one to get it, too, in your household. Okay, so while it's a common and transmissible infection, one that appears in many cats since it's such a common fungus, and since an outbreak in a shelter or adoption center with many animals can be hard to control, it's not life-threatening nor permanent to a healthy cat, even without treatment. It's a self-limiting infection, meaning that a healthy cat will typically get over ringworm on its own within 5 to 6 months or so. But here's the catch. Ringworm can stay in spores or its other forms on your body or other animals, it can stay in you or other animals, infect you or them, and then even though your cat is healing, you might have gotten infected from your cat, and then you're infected, your cat gets better, and then you give it back to your cat and they get it all over again. And ringworm can also have its spores stay in furniture for up to a year and a half at a time. So even if your cat gets it and gets better, there might still be spores in your couch. Your cat goes up there, gets it all over again. So really talk to a vet, and you really should be treating it because you should look after it so it doesn't end up as like this never-ending cycle of ringworm infection. Okay, so you might be wondering, what is ringworm? So what should I be worried? What is ringworm? What does it do? What should I look out for? What should I expect? What is it? Okay? Here, I'll tell you. So, what are the symptoms? Well, the most common and prevalent symptoms of ringworm in cats are patches of missing fur and scaly lesions on the skin. As for humans, it's somewhat similar, as the most common symptoms of human ringworm is infections and rashes that are that have lesions, often with a circular ring around the rash on the outside, which ringworm gets its name from. Obviously, if you get ringworm, talk to a medical professional or a dermatologist. And if your cat gets ringworm or you suspect your cat has ringworm, go take them to a veterinarian and they'll tell you what to do from there. Okay, so your vet will give you a treatment plan that differs based on various factors, such as the age and health of the cat, the severity of infection, and even the breed. But to give you an example of what I had to deal with, it included cleaning up every surface in my building, or in my place, including furniture, and tables, and the walls, and the floor, mopping up every day, sweeping, vacuuming every day, lint rolling every surface every day, doing laundry on every single thing that can be laundered every single day, sheets, bed sheets, clothing, towels, bath mats, pillowcases, everything, every day, wash, dry, wipe things down, disinfect, wash your hands after getting a cat. It's not fun to deal with. So, again, keep in mind, talk to your vet if you suspect your cat has ringworm. Not all cats will get it, but it is very common and you should exercise precaution. And also I had to bathe my cat twice a week with special shampoo where I had to bathe them, get the shampoo on them, bathe them again. Really, it was just a tough, hard experience. But we got through it, and you can get through it too. Okay. With that anecdote out of the way, it's time to describe to you a normal day that one might expect with a cat. Though, of course, it differs person to person and cat to cat. So I'll kind of be going off of my cat as well as my experience. So here we go. So you wake up, you wake up in the morning, and you wake up in the morning, preferably at set times so your cat knows when you'll be up and about, so it doesn't bug you thinking you're never going to wake up again, never give it attention again, and it'll let you be. You wake up, you feed your cat a set amount, which you research of a food of your choice, which you research, and then you fill their water bowl. And then you spend some time with your cat, set up some toys and structures so that your cat has those now that they wouldn't wake you up if they used it, and that they have something for mental and physical stimulation. Then you maybe play with your cat a bit, give it water, then you maybe play with your cat a bit and go to work if you have a job, come back, feed your cat, give it water, play with the cat for 15 to 30 minutes, play with the cat again before bed, feed them a big meal and some treats, take everything down they keep you up with overnight, scoop their litter and turn off the lights and go to bed. Really, that's all. And of course it differs day by day, person by person, cat by cat, but that's a pretty average day. Really, when your cat is healthy and happy, most you'll have to do for your cat on an average day is feed them, give them water, and play with them a bit, and scoop their litter once or twice. It's not the most work, but it still takes some responsibility. With that, we finally come to the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you took away some useful information. I hope you all have a great day, and goodbye.